I can still remember the moment I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the house I had bought with my own hands. A bright red for sale sign swung in the breeze, and inside, strangers were moving their furniture in. The worst part, my daughter and her husband had vanished, along with every scrap of my savings and the deed to my home. Neighbors told me to let it go, it's gone for good. But they didn't know me. I'm not the kind of woman who sits quietly while everything is stolen. This time, they would regret crossing me. My name is Linda Thompson. I'm 60 years old, a widow, and I live in a quiet suburb of Florida. After my husband passed away 5 years ago, my world felt unbearably empty. The house was too quiet, the evenings too long. The only thing that kept me going was my daughter, Rachel. She's my only child, my pride and joy, the one piece of family I had left. When Rachel met Ethan, I was happy for her. He was polite at first, the kind of man who shook your hand firmly and called you ma'am. He spoke about his dreams of starting his own business, about how he wanted to build a future with Rachel. I wanted to believe him. After all, my daughter deserved someone who would take care of her. So when they started talking about buying a home, I didn't hesitate. I told them I would cover the entire cost. Every penny. It was more than just money. It was my way of giving them stability, a safe place to grow their lives together. I saw it as my final, most precious gift as a mother. We found a beautiful 2-story house on a quiet street. White shutters, a small porch, and a garden that caught the morning sun. I wrote the check without blinking. After the purchase, I paid for new hardwood floors, modern appliances, and even little decorative touches. The curtains Rachel loved, the vintage dining table Ethan claimed would be perfect for family dinners. It wasn't just a house to me. It was a piece of my heart. I imagined future holidays there. Thanksgiving dinners with laughter spilling from the kitchen, Christmas mornings with grandchildren tearing open presents by the tree. Every nail, every coat of paint felt like an investment in my daughter's happiness. I never once thought about putting my name on the deed. Why would I? Rachel was my daughter. Family trusts family. And Ethan? Well, I told myself he was part of the family now, too. Looking back, maybe I was naive. Maybe I was so blinded by love for my daughter that I didn't notice the small cracks forming. Ethan sometimes avoided eye contact when money came up. Rachel stopped calling as often, claiming she was busy with work. I told myself it was just life settling in. But the truth? The betrayal had already begun. I just didn't know it yet. It started with a text. Just one short message from Rachel. Mom, don't come over this week. We're busy. I stared at the screen, a little confused but not overly worried. Everyone has busy weeks, right? But then it happened again the next week, and the one after that. Every time I offered to drop by with a homemade casserole or help with their garden, I got the same vague excuse, we're not home, it's not a good time, or no reply at all. At first, I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe they were going through something private. Maybe Ethan's business had hit a rough patch. But in the back of my mind, unease started to take root. Then, one Saturday morning, I ran into Mrs. Carter, their neighbor, at the grocery store. She greeted me warmly, then tilted her head and said, "So, you're finally selling the house? I thought you loved that place." I froze. Selling the house. My heart thudded in my chest. "What do you mean?" I asked. She looked surprised. "Oh, the real estate agent's been by a few times. The for sale sign went up last week. Everyone on the street's been talking about it." My groceries suddenly felt like they weighed 100 pounds. I left them in the cart, walked straight out to my car, and drove to Rachel's. When I turned the corner, there it was, a bold white sign staked into the perfect lawn I had paid to have landscaped. For sale. And worse, the windows were bare. No curtains. No furniture visible inside. Panic clawed at my throat as I rang the doorbell, but no one answered. I peered through the glass and saw strangers moving boxes, their voices echoing in the empty space. "Excuse me," I called out to one of them. "Where's Rachel? This is my daughter's house." The man set down a box and shrugged. "We just bought it. Closed the deal last week." My knees went weak. I demanded to know where Rachel was, but no one could answer me. That night, after dozens of unanswered calls, I finally got a terse text from her. "I've moved. Please don't contact me for a while. It's better this way." Later, I learned the truth. Rachel had sold the house behind my back, taken every cent from the sale, moved with Ethan to another state, and cut me off completely. The money was gone. But the money wasn't the real wound. It was the knowledge that my own flesh and blood, the person I had loved, supported, and trusted above all else, had turned her back on me without a shred of remorse. It felt like someone had driven a knife straight through my chest and twisted. At first, I did nothing but cry. For days, I wandered the house like a ghost, clutching the photo of Rachel as a little girl, her toothy smile, her small hand in mine, wondering how we had gone from that to this. I could barely eat. I barely slept. But somewhere between midnight tears and morning coffee, a realization hit me like ice water. If I let this go, if I stayed quiet, they would write me off as the same fragile, helpless woman they thought I was. They would move on with my money, my house, and never look back. And that I could not allow. The grief hardened into something else. Something sharp. Resolve. I started with a phone call to Robert Jensen, my late husband's attorney. He had been with our family for decades, and I knew he still had copies of certain documents. He listened quietly as I told him everything, then his voice dropped into that deliberate, dangerous calm only lawyers have. "Linda, if what you're saying is true, this isn't just betrayal. It's criminal." Next, I hired a private investigator. Not the flashy kind you see in movies. This was a gray-haired man named Wallace, who had a knack for making people talk without them realizing they'd said too much. I gave him one task. Find out exactly where my daughter and her husband have gone, and what they've done with my money. Meanwhile, I began quietly tracking Rachel's financial footprint. I still had access to some old joint accounts, and though she'd tried to cut me out, she'd made one mistake. She hadn't fully severed the trail. It didn't take long for the pieces to come together. Wallace returned with a thick folder of photographs, receipts, and bank statements. Ethan, it turned out, was neck-deep in a tax fraud scheme involving his construction company. Shell companies, fake invoices, cash withdrawals in the tens of thousands. And Rachel. My Rachel had her name tied to an investment fund, except the only investor was me. Every cent in that account could be traced directly back to the money from the house sale, my retirement savings, and even the small trust my husband had left me. Looking at the evidence, I felt two things at once: a deep, aching sadness, and a spark of grim satisfaction. They thought they had covered their tracks. They thought I would never find them. But now I had something stronger than anger. I had proof, and proof, in the right hands, could destroy them. The moment I held that thick folder of evidence, my mind shifted from grieving mother to strategist. Every move would have to be precise, not reckless rage, but surgical strikes. The first step was the house. Wallace's research had uncovered something critical. The sale wasn't finalized. The buyers, a young couple moving from out of state, were still waiting on one last authorization. My authorization, because my name was technically still on part of the deed. Rachel and Ethan had overlooked that detail in their rush to cash out. I called the buyers directly, introducing myself as the rightful co-owner. I explained that there were legal complications and that they might want to reconsider. At first, they hesitated, until I slid the evidence across the table, proof that the sellers were under investigation for financial fraud. Their faces drained of color. By the end of that meeting, they agreed to back out of the deal completely. Step 2 was Ethan. I packaged every shred of his tax fraud, the shell companies, the fake invoices, the cash withdrawals, into a neat, damning dossier. Then I sent it anonymously to the Florida Department of Revenue and the IRS. I didn't need them to knock on his door tomorrow. I just needed the wheels turning. Once government wheels start, they grind slowly, but they grind relentlessly. Step 3. The money. Using Robert Jensen's help, I filed an emergency injunction to freeze the accounts tied to the so-called investment fund. Since all the deposits came from me and the withdrawals benefited only Rachel and Ethan, the judge granted the freeze without hesitation. And then I waited. It didn't take long. On a Wednesday afternoon, I got the first sign it was working, a panicked voicemail from Rachel, her voice high and tight. Mom, there's some kind of problem with the bank. They've frozen everything. We can't access anything. By Friday, they were stranded. The house sale had collapsed, the buyers had walked away, and every account they relied on was locked tight. Without the sale money, they couldn't cover their new apartment lease in the other state. Without access to their investment fund, they couldn't even pay their car payment. By Sunday evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it slowly. There they were, Rachel and Ethan, looking nothing like the smug, untouchable pair who had stolen from me. Ethan's shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed. Rachel's eyes were red, her voice trembling. Mom, we need to talk. I didn't smile. I didn't invite them in. For the first time in months, I had the power. And they knew it. They stood in my living room like two cornered animals, eyes darting, hands twitching. Rachel's face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan avoided my gaze entirely, shuffling his feet like a schoolboy caught stealing lunch money. I didn't offer them coffee. I didn't offer them a seat. Instead, I walked to the table and set down a thick, heavy folder with a satisfying thud. This, I said, sliding it toward them, is everything. Rachel's hands trembled as she opened the cover. Inside was a meticulous collection, every bank transfer, every document proving they had used my assets without consent, every receipt tied to the fraudulent investment fund. Beneath that, neatly clipped together, were Ethan's tax fraud records. Fake companies, phantom invoices, unreported income. Every dirty detail in black and white. Ethan's jaw tightened. This is illegal. What's illegal? I cut in, my voice cold and steady. Is what you did. And before you start crying about the law, remember this. The IRS doesn't care about your excuses. Neither does the press. I reached into my bag and pulled out one last document, a contract, freshly printed, with my attorney's letterhead stamped at the top. You're going to sign this, I said, placing it in front of them. It states that you will return every cent you took from me, plus interest. Payment in full, within 6 months. In exchange, I'll keep all of this. I tapped the thick folder, out of the hands of law enforcement and the media. Rachel's voice cracked. Mom, you wouldn't. I leaned forward until I was eye to eye with her. You chose money over your mother, Rachel. You sold the home I gave you. You lied to me. You cut me out of your life the second I was no longer useful. You made your choice. Now this, I pointed to the contract, is your only way out. Ethan muttered under his breath. We don't have that kind of money. Then figure it out, I snapped. Sell your car. Sell your jewelry. Sell your pride for all I care. But don't think for a second I'll hesitate to hand this file to the police and every news outlet in Florida. Silence stretched in the room, heavy as concrete. Finally, Rachel's shaking hand reached for the pen. She signed first, her signature small and unsteady. Ethan followed, gripping the pen so tightly it nearly snapped. I gathered the papers, slid them into my bag, and stood. We're done here, I said flatly. As they left, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pity. What I felt was something sharper, the deep, solid satisfaction of taking back what was mine. Rachel signed without another word, her eyes fixed on the floor. Ethan didn't even wait for her to finish. He stood up, mumbled something about getting the car, and walked out without looking back. The slam of the front door echoed through the room, and for the first time in months, I felt the tension in my chest begin to ease. The next few weeks were quiet. There were no phone calls, no sudden visits, no guilt-laden speeches from Rachel. The money began trickling back into my account, bit by bit, just as the contract demanded. Each transfer was like a small piece of my dignity being returned. 3 months later, I sold my old house and moved into a modest apartment in a sunlit complex on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, every corner chosen by me, every item paid for with my own hard-earned savings. The balcony faced east, catching the morning sun, and I began each day with coffee in hand, watching the light spill over the palm trees. My neighbors were kind in ways I hadn't experienced in years. Mrs. Green from across the hall baked banana bread every Sunday and insisted I take a slice before the good bits are gone. Mr. Patel, who tended to the community garden, taught me how to grow tomatoes in pots. In their small, everyday gestures, I found a warmth that my own daughter had long stopped offering. I filled my days with things that made me feel alive again, joining a book club at the local library, taking watercolor classes, and even volunteering twice a week at a thrift store that supported cancer patients. Somewhere along the way, the sharp edges of betrayal dulled into something softer. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. Rachel never came to visit. She sent the remaining payments through her lawyer, no notes attached. And that was fine. I no longer needed her presence to feel whole. The truth was, I had spent too many years mistaking obligation for love. One evening, sitting on my balcony with the scent of fresh banana bread drifting through the air, I realized something. Family is not defined by blood alone. It's defined by respect, by kindness, by the willingness to stand by each other when times get hard. Without those things, all you have are strangers who happen to share your last name. I had thought losing Rachel's affection would break me. Instead, it freed me. I had learned to draw my boundaries, to defend my worth, and to never again hand over my trust without thought. Sometimes, to protect yourself, you have to stand up, even against the people you once loved most. And while it hurts, it's the kind of pain that makes you stronger. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I smiled. My life was smaller now, but it was also brighter. And for the first time in a long time, it was truly mine. Know your worth, and never allow anyone, not even family, to strip away your right to control your own life. Love without respect is just manipulation in disguise. Justice doesn't always arrive on its own. Sometimes, you must stand up and fight for it yourself. Protect your boundaries, defend your dignity, and remember, your life is yours to live, and yours alone to command.